New Bali YouTube channel.
Al Jazeera quietly released this report about an active, deadly outbreak.
Yeah, it really flew under the radar for a lot of people.
It totally did. But, you know, the most terrifying part of the dispatch wasn't the mortality rate of the virus, it was the headline itself.
Right.
It read, "The Ebola outbreak the world isn't paying attention to." Just like, let that sink in for a second.
That's heavy.
We are living in a moment where a highly lethal hemorrhagic fever is spreading, and the collective global response is essentially to just, hit the snooze button. We're suffering from this profound systemic case of pandemic amnesia.
It's a stunning paradox, really.
Yeah.
I mean, you have a massive news organization plainly stating that the public is ignoring a biological threat.
Right.
But simultaneously, in the medical community, the alarm bells are ringing louder than ever.
Yeah.
Like, we're looking at this viral presentation published by Dr. William Lai on the Health Decode channel.
Yeah, the 22-minute video.
Exactly. It's a highly urgent warning titled Ebola Virus Outbreak Explained: Symptoms, Spread, and Survival. So the medical data is literally screaming for our attention, but the sociological data shows everyone is simply looking the other way.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the gap between a medical expert warning us about Ebola and the public collectively shrugging, that's
Yeah.
where the real danger lies.
Absolutely.
So our mission for you listening today is to decode this warning. We need to figure out why Ebola is back in the spotlight right now and how its biology and logistical demands actually compare to the COVID-19 pandemic we just lived through.
Which is a crucial comparison.
Right, and what these experts are saying about our true state of preparedness. I mean, why are we ignoring this? Is it just pure bone-tired exhaustion?
What's fascinating here is the mechanics of that exhaustion. It's not just a feeling, you know.
Mhm.
It is a structural vulnerability.
How so?
Well, public health logistics run entirely on the fuel of public attention. Attention is what drives emergency government funding. It drives the mobilization of supply chains, the hiring of contact tracers.
The political will to enact quarantines, right?
Exactly. When the public is burnt out and apathetic, the early warning systems are underfunded, and that initial containment window just slams shut.
It feels like we've all walked away from a massive house fire, right? And now there's a new fire smoldering in the shed, but everyone is just too exhausted to grab the hose. So what does this all mean? Are we ignoring the smoke just because we're tired of fires?
And that refusal is exactly how a small outbreak becomes an epidemic. The sources we're analyzing stress that small, localized outbreaks are the exact moments when a global health system must be hypervigilant.
Because it moves fast.
Right. Ebola is not a virus that affords you the luxury of a delayed response.
Mm-hmm.
The initial transmission chains had to be severed immediately,
Yeah.
and that requires boots on the ground, extreme isolation protocols, and community cooperation. If the community is too fatigued to cooperate, the virus just wins the math equation.
Wow. That brings us to an incredibly dangerous assumption I think a lot of us are carrying around right now. Which is there's this unspoken idea that because we survived a massive global respiratory pandemic, we've basically passed the ultimate stress test.
Ah, yeah.
We figured out mRNA vaccines at warp speed. We learned how to distance. We built all this infrastructure. The assumption is that we're like hardened veterans now. We can handle whatever the jungle throws at us.
But Dr. Lai's presentation aggressively attacks that assumption.
Yeah.
He poses this chilling counter-question in his talk. What if the next global health crisis is actually even more dangerous than COVID-19?
Oof.
Yeah. And he frames this by placing the biology of the two viruses side by side to demonstrate why surviving one absolutely does not equip you for the other.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because we need to get into the actual biology of this. We are talking about fundamentally different beasts.
They're very different.
Right. COVID-19 is a respiratory virus. It binds to ACE2 receptors, mostly in our respiratory tract. It's highly contagious through the air, giving it a massive reproduction number, the R0, but a vast majority of the people who contract it experience mild symptoms. Ebola, on the other hand, is a hemorrhagic fever. It spreads through direct contact with bodily fluids. The transmission mechanism is slower, but the way it attacks the human body is notoriously brutal.
Brutal is the right word. The mechanism of an
New
Ebola
Bali
infection
YouTube
is akin
channel.
to a coordinated military strike on the body's communication systems.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, while COVID primarily targets the respiratory system, Ebola goes straight for the immune system itself.
Wait, really?
Yes. It infects the macrophages and dendritic cells. Those are the very white blood cells that are supposed to sound the alarm and fight off invaders. The virus uses these cells as Trojan horses to travel through the lymphatic system directly to the liver, spleen, and adrenal glands.
So it's actively hijacking the security guards to gain access to the rest of the building.
Precisely that, and the most devastating part is what happens next to the endothelial cells.
What are those again?
They're the cells that line the interior of our blood vessels. The virus causes these cells to detach from one another.
Oh my.
Yeah, the structural integrity of the blood vessels simply dissolves. That is what leads to the catastrophic internal and external bleeding characteristic of a hemorrhagic fever.
That's terrifying.
You're dealing with a pathogen that has a historical mortality rate that can range anywhere from 50 to 90% depending on the strain and the medical response.
Which completely shatters the idea that our COVID-era infrastructure is ready for this. I want to upgrade an analogy here.
Go for it.
If the global health system is a power grid, COVID was like a massive, sustained brownout. It spread everywhere, it dimmed the lights globally, and it forced us to drain all our backup generators to keep things running.
That's a great way to put it.
But Ebola isn't a brownout. It's a localized, extreme high-voltage surge. And a high-voltage surge is incredibly dangerous if the transformer is already degraded and there's no surge protection left.
That power grid analogy perfectly illustrates the logistical nightmare outlined in the source material. Treating a highly contagious respiratory patient is difficult, sure. But treating an Ebola patient requires a logistical footprint that is exponentially larger and more rigid.
Because of the fluids.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You need specialized negative pressure rooms.
Yeah.
You need extremely rigorous protocol for donning and doffing full-body personal protective equipment.
Right, the Tyvek suits.
Yeah. A single mistake in taking off a glove can result in transmission. The medical waste. Every needle, every sheet, every piece of protective gear has to be incinerated under strict biohazard conditions.
And doing all of that requires a medical staff that is rested, highly trained, and operating with absolute precision. But our medical staff globally is running on fumes right now.
They are.
The supply chains are still playing catch-up from the last crisis. Financial reserves at global health institutions are just totally drained.
And that is the definition of a brittle system. A system under immense, sustained pressure loses its elasticity. It loses its ability to absorb a shock. When you introduce a virus that requires intensive, one-on-one, highly specialized critical care into a hospital system that is understaffed and financially depleted, the containment protocols buckle. The system doesn't bend. It breaks.
So if the macro level systems, the hospitals, the global health organizations, the government funding are this brittle, it forces a really uncomfortable pivot.
It does.
Because sitting around waiting for a fragile global supply chain to save us feels completely paralyzing. And Dr. Lee's presentation takes a sharp turn right here.
Yeah, he shifts gears completely.
He moves away from the macro response, the vaccines, the quarantines, and zeroes in on the micro. He focuses entirely on strengthening your personal immune system.
Well, to understand the weight of that pivot, we have to look at Dr. William Lai's specific background in the broader source landscape. He isn't just a virologist talking about public health policy.
Right, he does a lot of other stuff.
He is deeply entrenched in the science of cellular health, angiogenesis, and how diet impacts disease. His broader body of work focuses heavily on how specific foods can starve cancer cells or prevent cognitive decline.
Yeah, if you look at his other content, it's titles like 5 Great Snacks That Fight Cancer or, deep dives into the benefits of olive oil and specific vegetables for senior citizens.
Exactly.
His entire medical brand is built around the literal building blocks you put on your plate every single day.
Which informs his approach here.
But I have to push back on this, and I want a real biological explanation here. When we are discussing a virus that causes your blood vessels to literally detach and leak a virus that requires full Tyvek suits and massive medical intervention to stop, doesn't pivoting to talk about snacks and vegetables feel almost absurd?
I can see why you'd say that.
I mean, eating a bowl of broccoli is not going to stop a hemorrhagic fever from melting your immune system. Isn't focusing on diet just a distraction from the desperate need to fix our broken hospitals?
This raises an important question about the mechanisms of defense. You're absolutely correct that a macro response is the only way to halt the transmission of the virus across a population.
Right.
You cannot substitute epidemiology with a good diet. However, if the macro system is brittle and a pathogen breaches your community, your micro defense is the only armor you have before you ever reach a hospital.
Okay, fair.
And the biology of how nutrition impacts that armor is far from absurd.
Walk me through that then. How does cellular health actually provide armor against something like Ebola?
Think back to how Ebola attacks the body. We established that it targets macrophages and destroys the endothelial cells lining your blood vessels.
Huh. The security guards and the structural wall.
Exactly. Dr. Lee's expertise in angiogenesis, which is the growth of new blood vessels, is directly applicable here. Foods rich in specific polyphenols, omega-3 fatty acids, and certain vitamins actively strengthen the endothelial lining.
How interesting.
They reduce baseline systemic inflammation, which means your blood vessels are structurally sounder and less prone to permeability when under attack.
So it's literally reinforcing the walls of the blood vessels before the virus even tries to dissolve them.
Yes. Furthermore, a robust gut microbiome, heavily influenced by the fiber and plant-based foods Dr. Lee advocates for, is the command center for your immune system.
Right. I've heard a lot about gut health recently.
It's vital. A healthy microbiome ensures the rapid, efficient production of T cells and resilient macrophages. If your baseline cellular health is compromised by poor nutrition, your macrophages are already sluggish.
Making it easy for the virus.
Exactly. The virus has an incredibly easy time hijacking them. By optimizing your cellular health, you are not curing the virus, but you are creating a far more hostile environment for it to replicate. You are buying your body time.
Buying time for the medical system to intervene. Okay, that bridges the gap for me. It's not about broccoli curing a hemorrhagic fever. It's about making sure your internal security guards are fully awake and your structural defenses are reinforced before the Trojan horse arrives.
That's a perfect way to summarize it.
It shifts the narrative from pure, helpless panic to actionable resilience. You can't personally fix the global supply chain for vaccines today, but you can control your baseline cellular health at your next meal.
It is the ultimate antidote to the pandemic fatigue we discussed at the beginning. Action creates agency. And Dr. Leah uses this concept of personal agency to set up the final, most ominous warning in his presentation.
Yeah, things take a turn.
Preparing your body is just the first step in preparing your mind for a reality that is permanently shifted.
This is where the source material gets incredibly dark. He transitions into what we learned from COVID and the biggest future pandemic risks. The metadata tags on the video alone are basically shouting at us. Future pandemic, pandemic preparedness, global crisis.
They aren't holding back.
No. They are explicitly stating that this Ebola outbreak is not an isolated freak occurrence. We are entering an entirely new era.
An era characterized by overlapping, recurring biological threats. The historical gap between global pandemics used to be measured in generations. Now we're looking at a compressed timeline.
It reminds me of the psychology behind earthquake retrofitting, but on a biological scale.
Oh, that's a good comparison.
Right. Like if you live on a fault line, retrofitting the foundation of your house is expensive, it disrupts your life, and it forces you to think about a disaster that hasn't happened yet. Most people ignore it until the ground is physically violently shaking.
Exactly.
COVID was a massive earthquake. We felt the ground shake, our houses sustained massive damage, and yet this discussion of future risks makes it incredibly clear that we are refusing to retrofit the foundation.
Because we learned the wrong lessons from the earthquake.
What do you mean?
The lesson the public absorbed from COVID-19 was that pandemics are discrete chronological events. They have a beginning, a middle, and an end date.
Right, like a movie.
Exactly. Once the immediate daily threat recedes, you dismantle the testing centers, you cut the funding for virology research, and you return to the status quo.
You take off the mask and close the book.
But the lesson the biological data demands we learn is that our modern world is inherently vulnerable. The biggest future pandemic risk isn't just a novel virus mutating in a remote area.
Then what is it?
The risk is the intersection of that mutation with our collective amnesia. When a pathogen with a mortality rate of Ebola meets a global population that is actively looking the other way, the virus is granted a massive head start.
So the biggest vulnerability isn't virological, it's sociological. Our exhaustion is the very thing that gives the next virus the runway it needs to become a global crisis.
Which is exactly why we have to engage with this material. We have to look at the smoldering shed, despite the fatigue. Breaking down the threat into macro-systemic realities and micro-personal actions is the only roadmap out of paralyzing apathy.
Let's pull all of this together, because for you listening, this is a massive paradigm shift in how we need to view public health news.
It really is.
We started by looking at a deeply concerning disconnect, a terrifying hemorrhagic fever making a return, while the world actively ignores it due to pandemic burnout. We tore down the false sense of security that surviving COVID somehow means our hospitals are ready for anything.
Revealing instead a global health infrastructure that is dangerously brittle.
Exactly. It's lacking the resources and the surge protection to handle the extreme logistical demands of a virus like Ebola.
We then explored the critical biology of defense, recognizing that when the macro systems are fragile, your microdefense, your cellular health, endothelial integrity, and immune resilience driven by daily nutritional choices becomes your immediate armor.
It's about maintaining your personal baseline in an unpredictable world. Refusing to succumb to pandemic fatigue and taking agency over your own health is literally the first step in preparedness. You cannot fight a fire if you refuse to acknowledge the smoke.
Very true. And as we consider the reality of this smoke, I want to leave you with a different kind of mechanism to consider. We spent today looking at virology and sociology, but look at the physical geography of disease.
Okay.
A few decades ago, an outbreak of a highly lethal virus in a remote region would burn itself out locally. The geography acted as a natural quarantine.
Right, the distance protected everyone else.
Today, deforestation pushes human contact deeper into novel viral reservoirs, while modern air travel erases the geographic buffer completely. The timeline between a localized obscure outbreak and a global crisis used to be months or years. Now it is a single long-haul flight.
Wow.
If our global infrastructure is brittle and our collective attention span is shattered, how long do we really have before the shrinking map of the world forces us to pay attention?